All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig in a Pickle Krug Show with a little Brandon Aiyuk video. How many Brandon Aiyuk videos have we done? Quite a few. And this video is sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. Use Better to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. Tomorrow on the Krug Show with the coach, I will make my own Better lineup for the 49ers against the Titans preseason game. Download the app below and make sure you use the promo code NINERS, N-I-N-E-R-S, Niners, to get the first deposit matched up to $250. Well, I'm sure at this point, if you're like me, you're tired of the Brandon Aiyuk story. You want it to come to an end somehow, some way. Aiyuk has just tweeted out, it's two options out there. Pick one and stop dropping reports. Simple. So, Jordan Schultz has reported a couple things in the last day that are pretty interesting. One, he reported that the Cleveland Browns are unlikely to land Aiyuk, and they're most likely out of the mix for the 49er wide receiver. But he also tweeted out that Brandon Aiyuk and Kyle Shanahan had a recent sit-down, and the two sides, the 49ers and Aiyuk's agent, have restarted contract extension talks, and there's optimism now that Aiyuk could potentially remain in San Francisco. And if you're hearing this and you're a Steeler fan, you're probably just sitting there going, what? What is going on? What is going on? Is this guy coming? Is he going? Do they want him? Do they not? Do they want to pay him? Do they not want to pay him? Do they want to trade him? Do they not want to trade him? What's going on? I can understand the frustration if you're a Steeler fan. I mean, Brandon Aiyuk, Matt Mayoko, who covers the Niners for NBC Sports Bay Area, said the other day, he said, I kind of feel like Brandon Aiyuk requested a trade without really thinking things through. So, and then it kind of came out, and I think it's a very true thing, that there may be something personal really going on between Shanahan and Aiyuk. And people say, well, why would you assume that? Well, it just seemed like, the difference between what the Niners are offering Brandon Aiyuk currently and what Brandon Aiyuk is asking for hardly seems insurmountable. But to hear Shanahan and Lynch talk about it, it sounds insurmountable. As if maybe they don't want to get a deal done and they'd like to just move on from Brandon Aiyuk. I don't know what the truth is. I don't know if Shanahan is pushed out of shape because Aiyuk compared, said that he could get to the next level with Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. Maybe he took offense to that. Maybe maybe took offense to the fact that he seemed to be saying he'd rather play with Jaden Daniels than Brock Purdy, that he'd rather play in a Cliff Kingsbury offense than a Kyle Shanahan offense. I don't know how Shanahan feels specifically or about Aiyuk or this holdout. But I do know this. It doesn't look like the 49ers have an option that's better than re-signing Brandon Aiyuk. Let's cut right to the chase. Let's get right to the brass tacks on this thing. The 49ers are a football team. They're trying to win the Super Bowl. They're trying to win the Super Bowl this year. It's in New Orleans. Do they have a better chance of winning the Super Bowl if they have Brandon Aiyuk on their team, or a worse chance? A much better chance with Brandon Aiyuk than without him. Well, then I guess the person that wants to push back and say, well, I don't know about that. They might have better chance without him. Well, then you have to know that what they're getting in return. And at this juncture, if Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing were looking like, if Ricky Pearsall was looking like, a young Julian Edelman, and, Jacob Cowing was looking like Tyler Lockett or something like that, then maybe the 49ers could take this super strong we're not going to sign Brandon Aiyuk approach and be fine. But the reality is that Ricky Pearsall is fragile. and he wore the blue jersey all summer. And there's very, very, significant questions about his durability. And I question the durability of Jacob Cowing. He's a smaller receiver. He had 1 day of an NFL training camp and he missed the next 5 because of an injury. And now he's back, but even he doesn't look 100%. So, the one thing that nobody ever talks about with Deebo Samuel or Brandon Aiyuk is that these guys are incredibly physical. They're bigger bodied guys. They're durable. They can take hits. They can play the full season. The 49ers are much better with Brandon Aiyuk than they're going to be if they trade Brandon Aiyuk to the Steelers and get back whatever, Dan Moore, Nick Herbig, Alex Highsmith, and now they're saying, oh, we got to have a receiver coming back. And now we want to trade Brandon Aiyuk, but we want draft capital that we can then spin to a third team for a receiver. Well, what are we talking about? I mean, seriously, what are we talking about? So you're telling me that you're okay with paying T. Higgins what he wants, but not Aiyuk what he wants? You're okay paying Devontae Adams big dollars, but not Brandon Aiyuk, despite the fact Aiyuk's 26 and Devontae's 32. A lot of this has not made sense, this offseason, which only adds to the belief that this might be kind of a personal situation between Shanahan and Aiyuk. I just look at it, take all the personal stuff aside. Can the 49ers do better than having Brandon Aiyuk? Well, they could if they could find somebody that was willing to give them players that amounted to, a better situation they have right now. I mean, for example, if Jacob Cowing and Ricky Pearsall look great and they weren't fragile, that they were actually in camp and they were dominating, and you wanted to trade Brandon Aiyuk to the Chargers for Joey Bosa, you'd probably be smart because you have the receivers and now you can improve your pass rush. But Pearsall and Cowing have not been able to stay healthy. We don't know what they are. And Brandon Aiyuk is an all-pro wide receiver who's 26. And, his mom's a lifelong Niner fan. I mean, the guy is from Rockland. I mean, I have a feeling that he probably would like to be a Niner. So shame on Aiyuk for acting the way he acted this summer or this offseason. He went too far. Come on. He went too far. You don't go on a podcast and say that some rookie quarterback who's never played a freaking down in the NFL is going to be the guy that takes you to the next level, instead of your quarterback that was in the MVP race. So, you know what? You talked way too much there. And it does sound like it might be a little personal between Aiyuk and Shanahan. And maybe Aiyuk rubs Shanahan the wrong way. But all I would say to Shanahan is the same thing I would say to Aiyuk. Get over it. Get over it. The whole reason that all these people gather at Levi Stadium is to see you guys win games, to see you guys win championships. You have a great young receiver. You need him. And you got enough money to sign him. Sign him. That's the way I would look at it at this point. You have enough money to sign him. Sign him. You have enough money to pay him. Pay him. You're not going to be able to replicate, there just aren't a lot of options out there. There aren't a lot of receivers that are similar to Brandon Aiyuk. There's not a lot of ways for the 49ers to improve in this situation. I would say probably the best decision would be bite the bullet, pay him his money, and get down the road. I don't believe that, if you give in, that's a bad precedent. If you give in to guys who hold out, then you're going to, in theory, have more guys holding out. If you give in to guys who are demanding trades, then theoretically you're going to have more guys demanding trades. So the pushback is always like, don't let the players run the show, you run the show. But in my opinion, it really comes down to one thing and one thing only. Do you believe that Brandon Aiyuk deserves to be paid $30 million a year or close to it? Do you believe he's nearly a $30 million a year receiver? And I do. And here's why I do. The Niners run the ball more than any other team in pro football. That puts a drag on his stats. The Niners have a bevy of offensive weapons. That puts a drag on his stats. The Niners, they play at the 28th fastest pace in the league. There's only 3 or 4 teams that play slower than them. That puts a drag on his stats. So you have 2 or 3 key elements here that are dragging down Brandon Aiyuk's stats to the point where I would argue that Brandon Aiyuk is better than his stats. And so don't get caught up on not paying him because his stats don't quite measure up when he's the number 1 wide receiver in a run-dominant scheme. Just acknowledge that the guy is a perfect fit for you. He blocks in the run game. He's not a diva. He's a tough guy. He's a true football player in every sense of the word. And he's deserved his money. He doesn't hold court at his locker when the ball doesn't come his way. He's a team guy. When you dominate and hand the ball to your endless line of running backs, he gets downfield and hustles and blocks. This guy is worth the money. So, you play a slow pace, it's dragged down his stats. You have all these other weapons, it's dragged down his stats. You run the ball more than any other team in pro football, it's dragged down his stats. Then you're going to look the guy in the eye and say, you don't quite have the stats to pay you the kind of money you seek. And then you're going to have a slow pace and all these weapons and run-dominant offense. Those are 3 major factors that drag the guy's stats down, that suppress his stats. So, all things being relatively equal, are his stats a little light for what he's asking for? Sure. But there are reasons for that. And ultimately, if we're sitting here in early August, 49er fans want one thing: to win the fucking Super Bowl. That's what they want. And is your chances better to win the Super Bowl with Brandon Aiyuk or better with Dan Moore? Better with Aiyuk? Better with James Daniels? Better with Aiyuk? Better with Nick Herbig? Better with Aiyuk? Better with Darnell Washington? Do you see where I'm going with this? I'm glad the 49ers have reopened contract negotiations. I hope Jordan Schultz is right and that there is reason for optimism that Aiyuk will re-sign in San Francisco. He is the best weapon receiving-wise on one of the best offenses in pro football. You can't replace him. You can't get equal value in a trade. I know you're hugged up against the cap, but, the best, most compelling argument I've heard for not paying Aiyuk is that if you pay Aiyuk, you won't be able to pay Banks or Mooney Ward or Demo Lenore. All right. If you're putting that out there to me right now and you say, you know what? If you pay Aiyuk, you can't pay Banks, Lenore, or Ward. And if you pay Banks, Lenore, and Ward, you can't afford to pay Aiyuk. What do you want? I want Aiyuk. I like Banks. I'm a big fan of Lenore and Ward, but you have Renardo Green, you have Darrell Luter, you have Samuel Womack, you have Ambry Thomas, you have a bunch of guys who can step in and play corner. You don't have a Brandon Aiyuk. And watching Ricky Pearsall, I like him. He's not Brandon Aiyuk. Jacob Cowing, quick. Going to be a nice little complimentary piece. He's not Brandon Aiyuk. So I've had a lot of thoughts on this all summer. If Aiyuk doesn't want to be here, that's one thing. I think he does want to be here. I think that's what the hold-in is about. His mom's a lifelong Niner fan. He wants to get paid a few more bucks. Sure, Parag is a super tough negotiator. Aiyuk says you got two options out there. Pick one and stop dropping reports. Simple as that. I agree with him. Pick the option that says re-sign him. He doesn't want to go to New England because he doesn't want to play for Jacoby Brissett, Joe Milton, Bailey Zappi, Drake May. He wants to go to Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh can't satisfy the Niners. Washington can't satisfy the Niners. So keep your star wide receiver and get down the road. You are better with Brandon Aiyuk than you are without him. Let's simplify this discussion into that and that alone. And if I was John Lynch on that premise alone, I would re-sign Brandon Aiyuk. All right. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of The Krug Show. This video is sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of The Krug Show. Thanks to all of you guys for supporting The Krug Show on YouTube. Have a great day. Go Niners.